welcome Geoffrey Brown, Head of NYC Cyber Command, Chief Information Security Officer, City of New York, and Myrna Soto, Corporate SVP, Chief Technology Risk Officer, and Global CISO at Comcast.
Okay, well, this has been a pretty terrific evening, and I just want to start off by thanking Team8 for inviting us all together to talk on some pretty serious topics, to learn about some of the most exciting things that are going on in our industry, and perhaps to tackle what's to come. So I'm very excited to sit here with Myrna. We're going to have a great conversation, and we promise we will not keep you waiting too long for after hours. So to jump in, there's something that we all know. We know bottom line on top, right? Or bottom line up front. I'm sure all of us in our careers have put together those executive briefings where they say, what is the point? Tell it to me very quickly. So to recap, and I'm going to go first, unfairly, what I took here was some notes. So tonight, what did I recap as quick as I can? So cyber is warfare. We have unpredictable threat season coming up because of the many different things that are pressuring our geopolitical landscape. To complicate that concern, we may be leaving our OT networks behind. What are we doing about IoT to come? However, there's a lot of exciting innovation. We heard about it tonight. To get there sooner, we need to rethink cyber, and we can't wait to rethink cyber. We need to rethink cyber now. What are we going to do? We're going to disrupt. We're going to use exciting things like blockchain. We're going to deploy minefields. We're going to act at machine speed to produce insights and then defend our networks with those insights. We need the private sector in some ways to lead our way, because those of us, myself included, in government seats may need some examples to follow. And we just learned about virtual air gaps. So unfairly, I took the first one.
Stole my notes.
That's right. On the back of a cocktail napkin, which tells you where my mind is.
Yeah.
So to put that to you, what's your...
Sure. So you covered a lot. You covered a lot of the things that I found as key takeaways of the evening. I would want to reiterate just a couple of things. I think General Alexander's discussion about critical infrastructure is something that I believe is worth a lot more discussion in these type of settings. Goes along the same lines of the type of rethinking cyber, rethinking protections, and really at the end of the day, the need for velocity and how we innovate around security. And I think that goes hand in hand with the rethink security and rethink cyber. So I think it's been a great evening. Thank you.
I love that word, velocity. I'm definitely going to steal that.
Steal my notes?
Exactly. I like that. So to a certain extent, we're going to talk about some ways where we rethink cyber, and we've been doing this as an industry for a number of years. When you saw sort of what is this thing, what is New York City Cyber Command, what is that thing, right? Well, within New York City, one of the things that we're really proud of, if you think about what we're working on, it's 100+ agencies, and those agencies represent all those great services that are enabled through technology and provided to the residents, the visitors, and the great businesses here in the city. So as we looked at cyber as a domain, one of the things we're really proud about and how we organized was in July, the mayor signed an executive order, and the executive order did two things. It created New York City Cyber Command and made the head of that Cyber Command the Chief Information Security Officer of the city, and it took this discipline and they made it a direct report to City Hall. And that really pinpoints how very carefully and mindfully the city is thinking about cyber. So as I sit across from Myrna, I think about the two hats that she wears organizationally. One, having responsibility and accountability about this domain in an incredible multinational company. And two, very interestingly, all the different boards that she has responsibility and accountability to. So I sort of have two questions on that front. The first question is, in those journeys, how have you changed from being security as a naysayer to security is perhaps an enabler? And then the second question is, as you think about your role within your company, and then you think about your role as a member of boards, are there things that you wouldn't bring up to the board in your company, but you wish a CISO would bring to you when you're sitting on a board?
That's a loaded one. So I'll start with the first part of the question. It's been an interesting journey throughout my career and the companies that I've had the pleasure of working for, in particular the one that I work for today, the Comcast. We currently have over 54 different businesses underneath the Comcast umbrella. And when I joined the organization originally, it was to create the entire cybersecurity practice for the company. It was kind of hard to believe that back in 2009, wasn't that long ago, when I was recruited to join the company, there was no CISO. The company said this is important. They said it was important before the headlines, before all of the plethora of breaches that came to the horizon. And they had a lot of forethought to think about their business. One of their key businesses, one of our key businesses, is internet. So we are one of the largest internet providers in North America. That required us to build a cybersecurity practice that didn't say no, but said how. That took a lot of work, thinking about what the business drivers were, what kind of balance between risk appetite and risk tolerance were we going to adopt as a company, as we went from having not a lot of structure, not a lot of controls, to introducing those and easing them into the process. So I think that one of the things that we've been able to do, and one of the ways that I've been able to not be the bad guy, when I saw that on it, I was like, no. Not being the bad guy is making sure that you understand the needs of your business. Isolate did a great job of showing the opportunity to give end users very different experiences under different control environments. I think that in a roundabout way is what each and every one of us need to do within our organizations and not be seen as the no person. It's really how do we do it together. Secondarily, I've always introduced my role to my board as a brand protector. We could talk about CISO, we could talk about engineering and malware and all the different technologies that we use, but at the end of the day, my role is protecting the brand. Keeping it out of the headlines, number one, making sure that customer confidence is high, and speaking in those business terms. That is what I look for when I'm in the boardroom on the other side of the table. I've had the pleasure of joining 2 publicly traded boards. It was a unique experience. I won't name names so you don't figure out which one I'm talking about. But when I first joined one of my boards, it was heaven. The CIO of that organization said, finally, somebody that's going to know what I'm talking about. The other one said, oh no, somebody that knows what I'm talking about. Notice the tone. But the reality is that both of these companies saw an urgency to have a certain acumen and expertise in the boardroom, and I think we're going to see a lot more of that coming up the horizon. And in some cases, it's CISO expertise. Sometimes it's just technology expertise with a very good background around security. But one of my boards is an energy company, so we run critical infrastructure for the state of Michigan. And the other is an airline, which the Department of Transportation and all that comes with the security of an airline is extremely important. So my background with Comcast, running one of the other critical infrastructures in the country, being a telecommunications and media company, all kind of fit together. But in the boardroom, what I'm really looking for from the CISO and the CIOs that are presenting to me is a lot of transparency and being able to build advocacy in the boardroom for what they need. And I'm the first one to ask the question that they're hoping is going to get asked. And that's exactly what I get in my boardroom at Comcast. We've got a great engaged board. I don't think that there's ever been a time where I've said, I don't want to mention that to the board. But there have been many times where I've said, I'm going to mention this to the board, but I'm going to explain what needs to be done, and I'm going to walk away with an ask. Because the number one thing that any board member is going to hate is you're just bringing FUD. You're bringing fear, you're bringing all this chaos, and you're not really saying, here's how we can tackle it. And I think that we've heard about a lot of great opportunities today about how we can tackle some of those imperatives.
I think that's terrific guidance. I think talking about defending the brand, talking about making sure as you walk in that you have an ask. This is what we identified. We think these are the options. This is what's recommended. What do you think? I'm going to make sure I use that the next time I go to City Hall.
Absolutely.
See how we do. So thinking about the interdependencies, we heard a little bit before about private and public partnerships, and all of us have been involved in many of those conversations. And I think to a certain extent, there's been a lot of different ways that has been approached from the federal side, from the private sector side here in the U.S. But what I think about now in New York City, and the question that I really want to ask you, you mentioned risk a moment ago. As you and I sit together, do you think of the things that we represent as a cyber discipline in New York City, those services that are provided to, again, the residents, the businesses, and the visitors? Do you think of us as a risk? And if so, like, how is that calculated, and would you like to do something about it?
So that's a great question. So there's not a lot that you wouldn't think of as a risk in some way, shape, or form. So the answer cannot be no. But I can tell you that when the company made their acquisition of NBC Universal, that came with the plethora of real estate at Rockefeller Center and 30 Rock. So we are very reliant on the work that the city is doing to protect its infrastructure and to protect the businesses that are here. So right now we have kind of like a co-headquarters. We're headquartered in Philadelphia, but a co-headquarters here in New York. And we were just completely blown away by the mayor's edict and executive order to make cybersecurity a key imperative in New York City. And we believe that it's a best practice that we hope to see a lot more cities take on. So you guys are definitely a leader in that space. And thank you for the work that you do to make that happen. But we certainly, whenever we get engaged, we have 54 different businesses, thousands of third-party partners. We're constantly looking at vendor risk, where they are, what they do, what they're going to do for us, how we're able to control them or not control them, how do we bring them into the infrastructure or not. And we haven't always been perfect. We've made acquisitions where we believe that we had a pretty good sense of the risk, and then had some discoveries later on and had to take those action steps. But I'm seeing a lot more maturity around how we're evaluating the risk across the board. The City of New York made it easy for us.
Well, we'll try and live up to that.
No.
Finally, and we're rounding out our time here. I don't know how everybody did things in 8 minutes. That's an accomplishment. But we're rounding out our time here.
But somebody gave back time.
That's right.
I'm banking that.
We may take that from you. So the last question is something that I think about a lot as a practitioner. It was brought to the forefront a little bit today. Very simply, are we on a trajectory where we may be winning? And I'm very concerned about that question. And if, like me, you are concerned, what do you think we should do, especially thinking about the things we learned tonight?
So I think I'm an optimist. You can't do this work and not think that you're going to make a difference and that you're going to win. Obviously, there's been historical evidence that have indicated that we've got gaps and that there are a significant amount of our colleagues that are fighting a fight and sometimes swimming upstream. I think it all comes down to, earlier in the evening, we talked about offense and defense. And I think that there has been, the diagram showed kind of like our hyperconnectivity. And the reality is that I believe that we have to play a lot more offense. I believe that there is, I've been talking about predictive analytics before it was popular. I think that we're doing a great amount of work to understand how can we be smarter about what's happening. I believe that deception technologies has a core element in playing offense, although deception sounds like defense, but it's actually an offensive measure in my eyes. I think that we will win this game, but the game will never end. So the problem with claiming victory is that it's point in time. So we continuously have to be able to innovate and continue to put gas in the tank and make sure that we're being hyper diligent. And at the end of the day, The decision makers that we all work for or consult or advise need to have a really good picture of the reality of the landscape. There have been so many times where I've had conversations with people and they go, oh, Myrna, that's never going to happen. And I said, hold on, let me show you this simulation we did recently, and let me show you what happened. And then there's the shock factor. And you never want to lead with the shock factor, but we need to make sure people understand how critical this is. I worry about breach fatigue. I worry about putting on CNN and it says, oh, another company has been breached, and that my leaders in my company are going to say, doesn't matter. We're going to get breached eventually. Well, that may be true, but how we respond and how we contain whatever is happening to us, I think is where we win or lose.
So I take from that we need to decide that we can win. And I also take from that every time, even if it's a point in time, that we have a victory, we should celebrate.
Amen.
So I'm going to stop now because we might get to go celebrate.
All right.